Ladies and gentlemen, presented by the WCWA Network, it's the Insider's Edge Podcast with your host, Karlifornia.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Insider's Edge Podcast here on the WCWA Network. I'm your host with the most on the West Coast, Karlifornia and Fury. It's a joy to be with you all once again. And speaking of a joy, right here, right now, this is a joy, everybody, okay? Because there are so many people from the history of professional wrestling. So many people I wonder about. I want to know their story. I want to know what makes them tick. And this guy right here, I gotta build him up right now. He's a vocal acrobat, voice actor, the first imaging voice to be inducted into the Country Radio Hall of Fame for the class of 2023. Not just that, though. In my world, he's the greatest hype man in the history of professional wrestling through his time with World Championship Wrestling. It's the one. It's the only. It's Mr. John Willyard. How are you, sir?
Oh, thank you. Wow. Who's he talking about? He's not in this room. Thank you, Carl. Wow, that's amazing. Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Because look, but before I get into my questions, I have to say it up front. If I'm watching the weekly WCW Monday Nitro, etc., and we're getting towards that pay-per-view, they start hyping the pay-per-view with the adverts during Nitro. And knowing my mum didn't earn a lot of money, I knew that it would be real hard for me to get her to fork out the money for the pay-per-view, but it will get me so excited, these hype advertisements for the pay-per-views. And that's where I first discovered you and your voice. And honestly, I just wanted to say straight up, like, your voice made it seem so exciting and something that you needed to buy. And I guess that's why you got hired for that job.
Well, wow. Well, that was one of my real intentions, if you want to know kind of what went into it, aside from the fact that it was a very nice contract while it lasted. Beyond that, I really wanted to rope people in and get them excited too, like I was excited.
Absolutely. And I guess growing up, television, radio, music, that must have been quite a big deal for you.
Yes, as a kid, I was really impressionable living in the Los Angeles area because I was under the antennas under the signal of all this great early television and radio, and it always intrigued me. As a matter of fact, I guess I would be the second generation to really be intrigued by the magic of radio and what some of those announcers could do. In the case of my dad, who always said that he wanted to be a big time, as he said, a big time radio network announcer. Well, that didn't turn out for him. I think one of the most impressionable moments for him in his childhood was when he heard live the War of the Worlds done by Orson Welles in New York in 1938, October the 30th, 1938. He remembers it so vividly that he would tell me stories about what he was doing in his kitchen in Charlotte, North Carolina. He actually walked out the back door and looked north on the horizon, thinking he might see some Martians landing, north of Charlotte, North Carolina. So yeah, theater of the mind, I would say, was really big to him. I think it exuded into my life too, and the things that I've done not only on television but on radio, and certainly what I did for WCW and the NWO too. And I did a lot of radio commercials for that, but I did mostly, I'd say, TV promos and merchandise. And this is before a website, so you had to give that real quick phone number, 1-866-WCW 8661 or something like that. Yeah. So it was always a bunch of numbers that were jumbled together.
That's great stuff, John. And I want to ask you, like, as you're growing up, you have an interest in this field, I suppose. When did you first think that you had like a talent for voice work?
Ooh, good question. I think not until I reached because I was in music, I was a real serious trumpet player. In fact, when I was first chair trumpet in every orchestra and band and marching band and symphony that I was in beginning in fifth grade. And so I took that really seriously. And it wasn't until I got to college in San Francisco where they had a small radio station there on campus, and I got absolutely zero credits for it. It was not a course, it was just the radio station was there. And I spent way too much time. I remember taking a tray from the cafeteria and going up there to start my shift at 6 p.m. and then I signed it off at midnight. Well, when was I going to do my studying? I basically didn't. But at the end of that year, I was offered a job by a radio network that was based in San Francisco, and they had a flagship station. And I worked with them for about 6 or 7 years. And I worked with some fantastic people who had a rich background in radio, who were really radio stars in their own right when I was 20, 21 years old. Yeah. So I think that's when college radio is when it struck me that, well, perhaps I could do something with this voice.
Absolutely. And you would have to do something with that voice, because I'm just listening to you talk to me right now, and you're not selling me anything, but if you were, I'd probably be buying into it.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, John. Is there anybody in your field that you consider to have like inspired you or maybe influenced you in any way?
Oh yes, I would have to say instantly the name. I don't know if Australians know this name, but it's Ernie Anderson. Ernie Anderson was arguably the greatest television promo voice, and he was on in I'd say the late 70s through the 90s. He passed away several years ago now, but he was the quintessential promo voice for network television. So Ernie Anderson, I'd say, is at the top. For radio communicators, there was a gentleman by the name of Ted Brown in New York. I think he was on WNBC New York. In my field, I guess there are people like Jeff Davis, based in Chicago right now, and he's a great promo voice. The late Brian James, he passed away way too young, and he was in his late 40s. And I was thinking about Brian, and if Brian had lived, Brian might have been the first one to go in to the Country Radio Hall of Fame in the category in which I set a milestone, which was the first. And you did your research. It sounds like I'm the first in imaging voice and voice acting to be so honored. Yeah. So that was kicked the door down there for others to follow. But like I said, Brian James, if he had not passed away prematurely and kept another decade and a half, I think, because I think he's been gone about 15 years now. He might have gone in before me.
Right. Okay. Well, there's some names there that I'm definitely going to check up and look into after this interview. So here comes the question. Before, I'm going to get into some WCW talk. Were you a fan of professional wrestling before there was any time that you worked for WCW?
Well, that's really an insightful question. Really, I was not. I mean, I was intrigued by it. I remember watching as a kid and seeing some of these in black and white television early. I'm trying to think of George. Oh, I'm trying to think of his name. Some crazy name.
George the Animal.
Well, I can't remember his name, but as a little kid, I remember seeing these guys, gigantic bodies, getting up on the turnbuckles, and doing these things that we saw so many of the WCW and NWO wrestlers do routinely. So, no, I really wasn't. I didn't gravitate to it. I tell you, it was an audition that got me the gig, and it just kind of landed in my lap. It really was something I didn't have to pursue. but I remember that I had to kind of fight my way through. Well, not fight. I think I had a a swath in the panorama of voices rather quickly. Those who they could use instantly and locally in Atlanta. And so that was a little bit easier because I was actually reporting to a production studio in Midtown Atlanta when all of this, when I started with them in 1995. So I had a 6.5 year run with WCW.
Right. So that's very cool.
Right till the end.
Of course. And, you know, who would want to replace you? That would be ridiculous. So I want to ask, you know, what would be like a typical day or even week be like in your life and your workload for WCW? Like, how many times would you have to, you know, be asked to, you know, record, you know, a certain advertisement or whatever the words are to describe that? But,
well, WCW work would come up among maybe 24 sessions that I would have a day with other clients, because I had a lot of other clients under contract.
Yeah.
Mostly country radio stations, some TV affiliates. I was actually at the time, in the last part of working with WCW, I was also voicing CNN promos, CNN and CNN International and Headline News. And I would get orders from the different producers, especially on the day of the show. It seemed like they would wait till the last minute and then they'd get their what they call their promo packages.
Yeah.
And those would be real. Now those were real kind of panoramic background, creating the mystery and the tension that was between wrestlers. Let's say, you know, like last week, Big Papa Pump, you know, that kind of thing. And Sting annihilated so-and-so in the ring. Can he get his revenge? You know, that kind of thing. And so this is before the internet. And I didn't have the benefit of being able to just make a WAV file or MP3 and then just attach it or put it to an FTP site. So couriers had to come out, and I was outside of the city limits of Atlanta. They'd have to drive, depending on traffic, maybe 45 minutes to get to my place, and then that much to go back to any number of studios. And I got to tell you that the TV or the video production houses that were all over Atlanta, they were kept so busy. And you know, there was a time in I don't know when it ceased, but I know in the mid to late 90s, there were 5 WCW weekly shows.
Yeah.
There was WCW Worldwide. There were 2 other syndicated that were pre-taped shows. And then there were the 2 live ones. There was Thunder on Thursday night on TBS. And then there was Monday Nitro on TNT. And it kept these people really hopping, really busy. When WCW sold to Titan Sports or Vince McMahon, which became WWE, and that was kind of a funny, and I know you know the research on this, that it was the WWF, but that was the Worldwide, what was it, Wildlife Foundation, and they sued, and so they had to change it, make the F and E. But when that was sold in March of 2001, shortly thereafter, those video post houses just went out of business. So it was really WCW that was keeping them humming. Yeah.
Wow, I did not know that. That's very, very interesting and fascinating to me, John. So yeah, now that you mentioned that, it's so interesting to think about the fact what it was like back in the 90s to the early 2000s, where you can't just record it and then send it, you know, through email. Someone actually had to collect it, and that, to me, that's like, wow. You kind of forget how difficult things were back then, but back then no one thought that it could get better, you know. So
Yes, there was life before the internet, and we did it quite well. So on any given day, even if it wasn't show day, like a Monday Nitro or a Thursday, where I might get an order that morning, and there would be a sense of urgency about it, and can you get this back to us as soon as you can, that kind of thing. But there could be other sessions throughout the week or requests with, let's say, merchandising. It might be a quick read for something like become a Jerichoholic.
Yeah, yeah.
Get your Jerichoholic T-shirt. That kind of thing, and that's where that number we slugged in at the end there. Call 1-800-866-WCW. No, it was call 1-866-WCW 8661. I still remember that number. We had to do the numbers. Like I said, no websites at that point.
Yeah, that's amazing, because now, like, it's really dawning on me just how much your voice is or was all over their programming. Because you might be doing previously, what happened last week and what could happen this week. You're not only doing that, there might be a bit with the magazine, this month's edition of WCW Magazine, and you're hyping all the sweepstakes and things of that nature, and how much it costs to get a subscription. You might be talking about WCW Motorsports and what happened over the last race for the WCW racing team, etc. Now that I think about it, your voice was all over it. So again, every time you say WCW or NWO, I feel like a hit of dopamine.
I love that. And another one, you were just conjuring up a lot of memories. Another one would be get your Nitro Girls calendar, And it wasn't just 12, it was something like 18. They had more girls than months. But they had a lot of things to sell. And like you said, there was the magazine back then. Of course, now it would be an online magazine, but you had to order things and wait a few days to get it in the mail.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, it's funny. As soon as you said the Nitro Girls calendar, and now I remember the advert for it. And see, I could sense the different change in your voice, because you're telling us about this calendar. It's an enticing product for the males out there to buy. So you've changed your voice slightly. But then if you're hyping the upcoming WCW Halloween Havoc pay-per-view, you get a bit more deep and dark with it. So, I'm impressed, John.
I can tell you've been watching YouTube. Every time I think about it, occasionally, and somebody had pointed it out to me several months ago, and they asked me, do you realize how much there is on YouTube? I mean, there's just hours and hours of material, not only the programming, and if you weed through, you can see some of those packages that I was talking about. Certainly the promos and the commercials, Halloween Havoc, World War III, Bash at the Beach, all of that, it lives on YouTube.
Yeah,
it's just amazing.
Great. It is great. I mean, I have pretty much on my hard drive, I have every piece of WCW programming from 95 to 2001.
Wow. Congratulations, man. That is unreal. And I see you're a golfer. I see your bag of sticks in the background there. What? Yeah, tell me about your driver.
I'm terrible. I am terrible. But it's
right,
fun.
We'll move on.
It's fun to go play sometimes. Okay. Anyway, thank you for letting me kind of geek out there and just ask you about all of these things. I wanted to before I talk a little bit more about WCW, I just want to ask, because I read online somewhere, and I believe that you had said this in 2009, you stated at that point you had still not done any movie trailers. Has that changed since then?
Not in the sense of doing work for the major production houses that do that kind of thing, and for major pictures. I mean, I've done movie trailers that were produced locally for a TV affiliate, but nothing official. And I would say it'd have to be official if it was done by one of those production houses that generally are around Hollywood and Los Angeles, who specialize in that kind of thing. I was going to tell you one thing too about you, because you were asking about a typical day.
Yeah.
So because there was so much work that I really wouldn't. I'd have to kind of set the pace by which I returned the work as it came in, and some days it was so monumental a chore that it really literally took its toll upon me, because a lot of the work was high energy, and I perhaps wasn't warming up my voice like I should have, and maybe not hydrating as much. No, I always hydrate. So there came a time in, I think, 2001, early 2001. I was doing a session on a Zephyr line, which is using ISDN lines. And so it enables you to do a live recording, live session with CD quality anywhere in the world. And it happened to be a country station in Detroit, Michigan. And right in the middle of a sentence, my voice just blanched. I don't know what happened. It felt like it was turning inside out. And I just stopped cold, and the recording engineer hit a talkback button, and he said, "Are you all right, dude?" And I said, "No, I gotta go." And I didn't know what had happened until the next day. I got in as soon as I could to an ear, nose, and throat in Atlanta, and they scoped me. And I've been scoped maybe 15 times now, where they put that wonderful camera on the fiber optic down your sinus passage, and look, and then drop it down and look into your larynx. They can see everything about the health and vitality or damage in your vocal folds, your vocal cords. And I had a bleed on the right vocal cord. I actually had a bleed, and then I didn't have anything on the vocal cords like a cyst or polyp, which are so detrimental to a singer or really a public speaker or a voiceover actor. But I did have a little thing called a granuloma, which was a growth that was on the arytenoid ligament that brings the vocal cords together in the back of the larynx. So I had to, ear, nose, and throat people, they always put you on something like Nexium, which is a proton pump inhibitor, which deals with any kind of acid reflux, because ENT people always think that when you are sleeping, there could be a little trickle of acid reflux, which damages over time, damages your vocal cords. So I went on that and changed a few things and was okay. But yeah, I was a little scared early 2001. And I think it was just a perfect storm of all this real high intense, because the country stuff I was doing, especially for the West Coast, was really West Coast of the United States, was really intense. Plus, then you add, WCW work on top of it. So yeah, it was quite something.
Wow. So now you've mentioned all that, I want to get to the happy ending of the story. So you obviously at that point in time, you must have been very concerned. This is your bread and butter. And now maybe you're worried you've done some damage. How was the recovery process? And, did it take a while to kind of get your confidence back when it came to that?
I kind of pulled back a little bit in the intensity, but my workload didn't reduce. And I think they gave me a steroid shot too. Yeah, I remember I had to have a couple of steroid shots, and those are a little scary, but because they say, now you're going to feel normal, but don't push it. I tried to ease back, but it all came back fairly quickly. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that.
It's been great ever since.
Excellent to hear. So a couple of random questions about WCW. Did you get to go to any of the live shows and events and hang out?
Oh, that's interesting. That was never a requirement of the job, but it was a benefit at times when it was in Atlanta that I could request a ticket. Not only did I get in, and they kind of a pro bono, or it was a freebie. But people like Neil Pruitt, who was a fantastic writer, producer, editor, who I became friends with probably in the mid 90s, and we're still friends to this day. I just had dinner with him earlier this year in January. And I did go on. I remember it was a very cold night, and I believe it was in late 2000 or early 2001. I know it was the winter, and our winter is your winter is hot. Ours was cold. It was I remember it was sub-freezing but it was sold out, and it was in the old Georgia Dome, which has been replaced by the Mercedes-Benz Stadium downtown Atlanta, where the Atlanta Falcons play, and they have major concerts there too. But that was a night that I remember a country star, Mark Wills, said, "Hey, I'm going to be there too." So we met up. I got this is really thrilling that I got to have a picture with Michael Buffer, who is that famous voice. The first time I ever heard Michael Buffer was for HBO Fight Nights, when Mike Tyson was coming to the fore in the mid 80s, early to mid 80s. And he was the one who would say, "Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to," I better not even say it because I've heard that if you say it in an unauthorized manner, that he will sue you. And it's an easy payoff. I heard it's like 10 grand to make it go away. If you were, let's say you were a television station somewhere in Ohio or a radio station in Arkansas, and you either mimicked that line, which is trademarked and he owns it, or you used his voice in an unauthorized manner, and rightly so, he would sue you. That's his thing. And so I think he was making some pretty good coin just for people to say, "Okay, I want to get rid of this. I don't want to go into a lawsuit and litigation."
I heard a rumor, I don't know if it's true, that he got, every time he did it on Monday Nitro for the main event, he got paid $20,000 every time and he only introduced one match, was the main event. Dave Penza did the rest of the show, but Buffer came up for one match.
That's the first time I've heard that, but I wouldn't put it past him. Yeah.
I'm sure Guy Evans might know what the correct number is there for the price, but
I have no idea how he has so deeply and thoroughly researched to the extent that he has. It's just astounding.
I'm very impressed with him. It's honestly, that book that he put out has been a triumph for me as a fan.
Man.
John, would you say that there was anything, looking back, that you could pinpoint with your time with World Championship Wrestling, at least, that you would say is your proudest work?
Oh, that's great. There are some promos that I have seen on here again on YouTube, because I didn't save anything. We were just moving so quickly, so fast through the work, through the day, that I didn't take time to save anything. There might have been a few producers who sent me something like, as if to say, "Hey, you really shined on this one. I just wanted you to hear this really turned out nice," that kind of thing. I would say some of those epic events that were the pay-per-views, I loved those. Like we mentioned before, Halloween Havoc, Bash at the Beach. Some of those promos were just they really stood out. And then there were a few of those pieces that we would that would set up the tension and the previously or last time, that kind of thing, that ran at the beginning, let's say, of one of the live shows, and that would tee up the event that was about to be announced, and that would happen in the ring. And I guess really my friendships too with many across many producers and people who some I still never met. I know we had a reunion. I don't know if they've had many like this, this size of people who were invited and who came, but it was, I want to say, it was 10 years after, I believe it was the 10-year anniversary of WCW going dark. And it was at a nice little bar restaurant, and they got a separate room, and people brought their memorabilia, and we talked and shared memories. And this was a time when I got to see who really put the show on: the truck drivers, the riggers, the people who put the sets together, who did the really heavy literally the heavy lifting, the behind the scenes people. I had known some of the producers, but man, to see those people who put it on the road, they seemed to really be so proud of what their association had been. That was pretty, that was exciting.
Wow, it's really cool to hear that everyone got together for a little reunion. So, the reunion came 10 years after the end of WCW. How did you find out that it was going out of business or getting bought by the WWF? Sorry.
Oh, yes. That was a really sad day. I think the person who had signed off on my contract was the one. They said, it was, kind of a technical terms that they wanted to quickly establish and bring me up to speed on. And I was just sad that all of those people were going to be losing their livelihoods. That was the thing that really bothered me the most, because it didn't put a terrible dent in my income, because I really was doing so much other work. I mean, it was nice. It was really nice. I remember that with that retainer, we were going to a church, and we used to go. Now we go to a big church in Atlanta that has a global footprint in many languages. As a matter of fact, there's a Leading the Way UK, and there's a Leading the Way Australia, and a big presence because our pastor, who was Egyptian born, but he was trained in Sydney. He made his way from, he was an immigrant. He got out of, this is going down a rabbit hole, but this is very, very exciting. He got out under Nasser, when Nasser was a dictator, right before the 6-Day War in 1967. So he was a teenager. He could have been imprisoned really for leaving the country. There was a law against it, people his age, but miraculously he got out, went through Beirut, Lebanon, and then from there he knew he was going to go to Sydney, because he wanted to be trained at this wonderful Fuller Theological Seminary in Sydney. So he's got a real heart for Australia, and that's where he met his wife of over 50 years, in Sydney.
Wow.
Yeah. So what was I saying about Australia? So we were going to a church previously, and they had a building program, and I remember we donated at least all of it or the majority of it for a long time. Now, this is amazing. This is how I see the fingerprints of God in my life and in my career. And that is that I suddenly got all this extra Turner business, because WCW was owned by Turner. It was a Turner company. I started getting work from TBS, from Turner South, and then CNN. And I remember back then, people would call more than email or text. And I would finish speaking with somebody on the phone, and I would hang it up, and I'd go, how in the world did they know to call me? Why did they call me? Well, looking back on it, you know what? It was just God winking at me. He was blessing me like I didn't even realize it at the time, but I sure see the fingerprints of God upon my career.
Well, that's great to hear that, once WCW was gone, that you still had quite a lot of work coming in, John.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
So I'm guessing, you're pretty comfortable with your work life at that point. You never had the WWF or WWE reach out to you to do any work for them at all?
Occasionally, no, nothing directly, which kind of surprised me, but I knew that they had their own stable, and I think it's people up there in um, Connecticut, perhaps, people in the Northeast. I'm sure they were happy with it, and maybe they just wanted to keep that distinctive sound that they had established, and I understood that. I have done a couple of things that were on a minor basis, wrestling wise, but yes, you alluded to the fact that I still have an ambitious schedule and a lot of clients for which I'm very grateful. And my inspiration for longevity in this business is a guy that you hear. I don't know if he's around the world with this program called Jeopardy, which is a nightly, syndicated program weeknights. And he's the one who says, "This is Jeopardy." That man just turned 95 years. You heard that right, 95 on the 13th of July. And
Wow.
those are first run shows. So he has to, he sounds that way at 95, like he did when he came on with Alex Trebek. So I thank Johnny Gilbert for being the inspiration for longevity in this business.
Oh, that's very cool to hear, John. And I'll get really close to the end of the interview here, but here's the big, I guess this is one of the big questions here. Getting inducted into the Country Radio Hall of Fame for the class of 2023. Could you at least, could you just tell me like how that made you feel, and how was the evening for you?
Oh, the evening was stellar. There were so many surprises. I'll tell you about a couple real quickly in a second, but I was very humbled and honored, especially because the announcement was made at the Country Radio Seminar in Nashville back in March. Some of the previous winner people inducted, and who I found out later were on the nominate or the committee that gave the vote for me, to go in, reminded me of how high the bar is set. I mean, they said in so many words, we don't just let anybody in. And I realized that beforehand, and I'd been nominated over the past probably 9 or 10 years, and they have asked me. Somebody has nominated me through the years, and the time was right. This was the year. Everything just came together. It felt like the timing was perfect. I was very, very pleased that I was the first to go in this category of imaging voice / voice actor. Nobody else among I think it's 149 who have gone in previously since it was established in 1975. The plaque is just amazing. It's beautiful. It's a laser cut surface, really heavy wood. It must weigh close to, I don't know, 12 to 15 pounds. It's really a beautiful piece. And so I have the duplicate of the one that's going to be mounted somewhere. And they had it on a wall. I remember going to the country conventions, the radio conventions in the past, and even taking pictures of some of the people who were my heroes, people who had gone in, friends of mine, older people. I've gone to many inductions, not as many as I'd like, maybe 6, 7, or 8 inductions, and seen some of the people who were responsible for my career, as a matter of fact, go in. That night was really magical. This is the first year that they wanted all of the speeches to be sent in before the evening because they wanted to load them into a teleprompter. Now, they've never done that before, but I know there are a few reasons. One, it's streamlined. And 2, they know how long the speech is going to be. You don't want to deviate and they said, we're going to give you a 6 minutes hard out. And I took that really literally. I mean, I kept paring it down, and I actually got down to probably 5.5 minutes. because last year there were some that just went on and on and on. You know,
Yeah.
one gentleman went for over 20 minutes last year. That didn't happen this year. It was really streamlined. So the Career Achievement Award this year, they always do that. They have a President's Award and the Career Achievement Award, and that one went to Barbara Mandrell. And there were some fantastic local musicians, local guitarists who happened to also be singer-songwriters. One of them wrote a big hit for Eric Clapton. I couldn't believe. I went up to him and I asked him. It was Gordon Kennedy is his name. Look him up, Gordon Kennedy, and see what a prolific songwriter he is. And I said, you know, one of the guitars seemed a little deeper than the other. And he said, it could be this because I've tuned it down one full step. And he said it was, I said, is that a Martin D28? He said, it's a Martin 0028. And all of a sudden he started playing these chords and I got chills instantly because what he was playing was Change the World. Eric Clapton. He wrote that on that guitar for Eric Clapton.
Wow.
It was unbelievable. So these two gentlemen backed up Trisha Yearwood. So Trisha Yearwood was special guest, and she sang 2 or 3 of Barbara Mandrell's classic, her iconic songs. And then on the last verse and chorus, out in the corner, out of nowhere, I didn't even know he was in the room, Garth Brooks shows up and sings with Trisha. And then they both said some very beautiful things in tribute to and looked at Barbara and brought her up on stage. Yeah, that was a magical moment.
Wow,
great night.
That's great to hear, John. I'm so happy for you that you got to, you know, be given you know, such a nice thing as, you know, a Hall of Fame award, because, you know, kind of solidifies, you know, what you've spent your, you know, your life's work. You know, it solidifies that you made it. You made it.
Thank you. It was a confirmation. Yes, it was.
Very cool, John. We're getting to the end of the interview here now. I just got one final segment here about finding out about your favorite things in life. The first one, though, do you have a favorite professional wrestler?
Ooh, I'd have to say maybe the Steiner brothers, if I could say 2. And if I could say 1, it would be Scott Steiner. I have a funny, I got to tell you that I think he was first known as Alex Wright. Remember, he came out, he's this good-looking, blue-eyed, blonde wrestler, and he would do that little dance move. And then they reinvented him. He went away for a few months, and then he became Das Wunderkind. And or Berlin. Maybe it was Berlin.
Yes.
So one night at a local movie house, an AMC theater that's got, you know, like 18 or 24 screens. My wife and I go in, and it was, I don't remember what we saw, but we had to sit in the very back row. And I saw this guy out of the corner of my eye, and I went, and he sat down. He was 1 seat away. I mean, there was one space between us. And before the movie started, I said, I remember I didn't want to embarrass him or I didn't want to monopolize his time, but I remember I just kind of leaned over and I said, Berlin. And he said, yeah, das Wunderkind. You know, it was him. And we didn't talk anymore. I just knew. And by this time he had that darker look. They had dyed his hair brown and or black. He wasn't that blonde Alex Wright any longer. But he was quite a specimen. He was really built well. He could move. He was agile. He had a lot of followers. Buff Bagwell was another one I liked, but I think Scott Steiner. And I ran into somebody just 2 weeks ago, even, who I looked at him. I was getting an eye examination. I hadn't been for about 3 years, and as he was checking me out, and I was giving him my credit card, I just sat back and I looked at him and those biceps. They weren't the big veiny biceps. They were just massive. And I said, "How much do you bench?" I said, "I bet you're over 300, well over 300." He said, "I can do a rep of 505 pounds." And I said, who's training you? And he said, and he talked about this guy named Scott. And I said, wait a minute, are you talking about, it was Scott Steiner is training this guy. Yeah.
Wow. Couple of great stories there, John. Thank you. Okay, moving away from wrestling now. I want to know, do you have a favorite book?
Oh, well, number one, the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
I would say Dietrich, the book by Eric Metaxas called Bonhoeffer. That was a surprising, amazing book. I think the subtitle to Bonhoeffer is Pastor, Poet, Martyr, Spy, something like that. And it really all went into who he was during the Third Reich. I mean, he saw Germany go down, and he tried to resist through the church, who he had great influence. Anyway, look it up. It's Bonhoeffer by Eric Metaxas, Metaxas, Eric Metaxas, and he's one of the most widely followed authors in the United States, if not the world. He actually has he has a thing called, I have yet to get to it, but it's called Socrates in the City. And they have it in Manhattan in New York City every few months. And he brings as a special guest notable people from around the world. So what else is it? Well, those are two top favorite books right now. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Next up on the favorite things here, favorite TV show.
One is of late, Gutfeld on the Fox News channel, and it's a late night show. It was on at 11 p.m. Eastern. Now they've moved everything down into more prime time. It's 10 p.m. But what else do I love? I loved I'm gonna go way back and say those variety shows that I remember when I was much younger. Shows like the Carol Burnett show. I mean, and Dean Martin, and they don't do variety shows like that. We ended up getting lazy and getting cheap by doing all of those situational or those reality shows because they are so inexpensive. But there was nothing like TV shows like that. Seinfeld was smart TV. That was wonderful. Newhart. I mean, I love the comedies and real good sitcoms. Last Man Standing was pretty sharp too, with Tim Allen. Yeah.
Some good choices there, John. Do you have a favorite film?
The classic at Christmas. How can you go wrong in saying It's a Wonderful Life? I mean, that's magical, the way that film was acted and produced. Boy, these are good questions. I should have thought about this. Star Wars, the original Star Wars, that was fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not so much for all the CGI. I want a real story. I want something well acted and a great story.
I agree.
I know there's some.
If you have special effects in every scene, it's not special anymore, is it?
Well said, Carl.
Do you have a favorite musical artist or band?
One of my favorites is Mac Powell, who used to be with a group called Third Day. It's a contemporary Christian group here in the United States. I'm sure they've traveled around the world, but they travel extensively here. Red Rocks. They've performed recently at Red Rocks in Colorado, which is you've probably seen that venue. We the Kingdom. That's three words. We the Kingdom. And they're actually personal friends too. Let's see. I love Sting. I had a chance to I did some work years ago in the 80s, and they were going to pay me with 2 tickets to see the Police World Tour. I think it was the Synchronicity Tour, and we couldn't go. All it would take would be drive down the valley in California about 2 hours. And for some reason, we couldn't go. So I missed seeing, the Police in their heyday. But I've always loved Sting, and I love what he says about that he thinks that all music should have a surprise to it. And boy, he sure has written, whether it's a change in chords or time signature, he's one for really maintaining what he believes.
Excellent. Yes, I think a lot of Sting as well. And of course the Police as well. Getting away from
Vince
the
Gill,
arts.
I would have to say this in country. I'm sorry,
Yep,
I'd
yes,
have to say Vince Gill. Vince Gill is wonderful. He's through the years. Garth Brooks as well.
Yep.
Keith Urban, from down under. From down under. Put a little Keith Urban on the Barbie.
Oh dear. Okay, getting away from the arts now, John. Do you have favorite food?
Oh, I like a really good, substantial fillet. A prime piece of meat, and I'll wait, to have prime. I like a good burger too. Italian is great. Pasta is great. Yeah. Salmon. Love seafood. Seafood of all kind, but I think salmon. And the way my wife makes it is so good.
Lovely. Do you have a favorite place to eat on the road or a favorite restaurant?
Favorite restaurant, I would say not on the road. I mean, those are sometimes out of necessity, and you just go, okay, you kind of hold your nose and go, okay, we have to eat something. But if you're really being intentional here in town, I would have to, when people come to Atlanta, I would say Bacchanalia is one. Marcel's was, to me, a big surprise, the biggest surprise in the last 5 years. Marcel in Atlanta, in the West End, West Provision, what do they call that area? West Provisions, West Bacchanalia, and the top of the Hyatt, or no, either the Hyatt or the Hilton. Top of the Hilton is called Nikolai's Roof, and they dress in Russian Cossack uniforms and they serve everything with such precision, and it's exquisite. They'll have the covered dish with the stainless steel, the topper, and they'll go ding. They'll all go off at the same time and pull to reveal what your entree is. It's quite something.
Oh,
so Nikolai's Roof, Bacchanalia, and Marcel's in Atlanta.
Okay, there you go. For all of you out there, if you're ever in Atlanta, there's some good suggestions. We've got 3 to go here, John. 3 to go, and then we can sail off into the sunset here. Do you have a favorite alcoholic beverage? And if you don't drink alcohol, just a favorite beverage in general.
I like unsweet iced tea. Yeah, I don't drink. I lost my taste for it. I mean, I haven't lost my taste buds. I just lost my taste for it. And perhaps maybe on a serious note, I've seen people who have kind of not been able to walk away from drinking, and it got heavier and out of control. And I just never I didn't want that to ever happen to me. And it was easy to step away, and I haven't had a drop in about 2 years. But unsweet iced tea is great. I like the Arizona green tea. I don't know if you have it there, but that's good. And water. I drink a lot of water.
Very nice. Yes, I drink a lot of water too. And
yes,
and
coffee, coffee too. Yes, coffee. Can't start the day without coffee.
Very good.
And I like Caribou brand better than Starbucks.
Okay.
Caribou.
Okay. And I do believe we have that Arizona iced tea here. I'm pretty sure I had a bottle of it about 2 weeks ago. Okay, John, 2 to go. 2 to go. This one here, this could be seen as a naughty one, but I could get generally I usually get quite a meaningful.
Can I plead the fifth? That's an American thing. Plead the fifth.
Of course it is. You see a good-looking lady. What might be your favorite kind of female attribute of a lady?
I'd have to say her eyes, her smile, and her curves.
Very nice. Very, very
And my
nice.
wife's got all that going on.
Well,
After 40 plus years.
I'm happy to hear that, John. Hall of Famer and a wife with pretty eyes, pretty smile, and has some curves. Very good, John.
Good question.
And the last one, John, and I think you're not going to be able to answer this because I have a feeling that maybe you don't do this, but do you have a favorite curse word? I don't think you curse.
You know, that's interesting. No, I don't. And it really turns me off. And I'll tell you where it really chaps my behind, I guess you would say. Oh, that's about the worst curse word I know. No, what really gets under my skin is when I realize that voice people, voice actors, announcers, if you will cuss out a producer or whoever wrote this, and they'll start complaining on microphone to the person who wrote it, and they just take out they let their disgust spill out. Well, I never wanted that to happen because, you know, those things live, and somebody's going to put them on the internet, and they are on the internet. That'll live forever. So that'll be your legacy. That's why I never fell down in that trap.
Well, I don't know, John. You just said chaps my behind earlier, so now I've got that on you, my friend. John, it's been so nice having the opportunity to talk to you here tonight. Honestly, I've been so thrilled just to get to know you, learn about your life, learn about, you know, how you got to where you got to in your field, in your career, and in life. So honestly, it means a lot to me, and I like saying this to some of my guests sometimes because I'm from Perth, Western Australia, which is known as the most isolated city in the world. So I think for the fact that your voice reached all the way over here to the most isolated city in the world, and you have someone in me who I couldn't figure out the name of this guy that did all this work for WCW.
Wow.
Guy Evans told me your name, and then I was like, oh, he was great, wasn't he? So you had a fan of me for, geez, over 20 years. So I just want to let you know that.
Wow, that blows me away. That really does. Thank you. That sincerely touches my heart. Thank you, Carl. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much, John.
One never knows.
Of course.
Wow.
And again, I appreciate your time on the show, and thank you very much again.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome, John. And thank all of you out there for joining me here for the Insider's Edge podcast here on the WCWA network. I'm Karlifornia. This is John Willyard, and I will see you all down the road. Thank you.
I'd rather not, King. Fuck.
What? You don't want a standing ovation from your hometown, JR? Come on. Come on.
It smells fishy to me, Vince.
Network, that's the way we play. Good God Almighty. Network, that's the way we play. Get puppies. Network, that's the way we play. Get.
The following announcement has been paid for by the WCWA Network.